Welcome to the Workforce Planning Update for Renfrew and Lanark counties. I'm your host, Shayla Brecken. The 2020 COVID-19 pandemic has stopped the world in its tracks, even impacting our small communities here in Renfrew and Lanark. On March 11th, the World Health Organization declared a global pandemic. On March 12th, all publicly funded schools were halted until April 15th, 2020. On March 15th, elective surgeries and non-emergency clinical activities were also canceled. On March 17th, Ontario declared a state of emergency, followed the next day by the provincial parks closure and visitors being banned from retirement homes. March 19th, the Municipal Emergency Act and Employment Standards Amendment Act were passed. On the 21st, collective agreement provisions were overridden for hospital workers. On the 22nd, plans for first responder free childcare were announced. On March 23rd, $148 million for social services funding for municipalities and organizations such as shelters, charities, emergency services, and nonprofits were announced. The government rolled out a $52 million emergency assistance plan through Ontario Works. On the 25th, Canadian businesses were mandated to be closed. The government announced $10 billion in tax deferrals. March 28th, public events and social gatherings of more than 5 people were prohibited. On March 30th, the government chose to extend the emergency state declaration. This came along with a recommendation that people over the age of 70 who have compromised systems to self-isolate. We also ordered the closure of all outdoor recreation amenities. On the 31st, Ontario schools and childcare were to remain closed until at least the 4th of May, 2020. On April 3rd, the list of essential businesses was revised. On the 7th, they launched an online portal to match skilled frontline healthcare workers with employers. On the 8th, enhanced safety measures and workplace inspections for essential businesses were created. Suspension of environmental oversight rules, limiting consultation or public notification was also included. On April 9th, it was revealed that March unemployment figures demonstrated 403,000 jobs lost, changing the unemployment rate from 5.5% to 7.6%. A new Ontario Jobs and Recovery Committee was created to assess COVID-19 impacts on business and the economy. On April the 14th, Ontario extended its state of emergency to cover the period up to May 12th. On the 15th, an action plan was released for long-term care homes. Testing for all staff and patients ensued. On April 17th, an emergency order to hire college students in the ambulance and paramedic programs yet to graduate to provide aid was established. E-learning resources were distributed to children in need. Expanded free childcare to additional essential worker groups were also included. On the 20th, a clawback of Federal Canada Emergency Response Benefit for social assistance recipients was announced. On April 23rd, Ontario long-term care facilities were required to supply their workers with PPE, and at the same time, Canadian military personnel were deployed to 5 of the locations to enhance care. On the 25th, a $4 per hour premium named Pandemic Pay Increase for hourly frontline workers was introduced. Health service providers were permitted to redeploy workers to support services in long-term care homes. On the 26th, the government announced all publicly funded schools will remain closed until at least the end of May. Limits on the dispensing of prescription medicines were also introduced. On April 27th, the government released their framework to reopen the economy. On the 30th, 65 new rules and regulations were introduced that Businesses Ontario must follow. On May 1st, certain businesses, workplaces, and essential construction projects were permitted to reopen on May the 4th. On May the 6th, mandatory closures were extended to May 19th, and the continuation of electricity rate relief was announced. On the 10th, Ontario reported 294 new cases of the novel coronavirus, bringing the total number of cases in the province to 20,238. On May 14th, Premier Doug Ford provided details on the province's first step of Phase 2 named Restart. Some businesses were allowed to open on the 16th, including campgrounds, marinas, and golf courses. On May the 19th, the Ontario government said that an on-site school year would not be able to recommence during the pandemic. However, online learning will continue. This faces significant challenges in the Renfrew and Lanark area without complete broadband access. On the 23rd, Ontario reported 412 new cases of coronavirus, bringing the total number of cases in the province to 25,040. The same day, thousands of people gathered in Trinity Bellwoods Park in Toronto, drawing condemnation and scorn from elected officials and city staff. On the 27th, the Ontario government extended the current emergency orders until June the 9th. Later that day, the province announced that chiropractors, dentists, massage therapists, optometrists, homeopaths, and psychologists can see patients once the profession gets the go-ahead and receives guidelines from the respective governing authority. On June 2nd, Ontario's state of emergency extended by 28 days. June 6th brought an extension of the emergency orders of Ontario for another 10 days. On the 8th, Ontario further announced that some regions of the province will enter stage 2 of its COVID-19 recovery plan. However, Toronto, Mississauga, and Hamilton are among the areas which were excluded. On June 9th, Ontario announced that daycares could open the following Friday. On the 11th, the province announced a cautious restart plan to allow visitors back into the province's long-term care homes beginning on June 18th. A few days later, on June 14th, Ontario announced it has now conducted more than 1 million tests for the novel coronavirus. On June the 15th, the province announced that several regions, including Durham, York, Hamilton, Sarnia-Lambton, and Niagara, were allowed to enter into stage 2 of its recovery plan. Toronto, Peel, and Windsor remained in phase 1. And finally, on June the 17th, the Ontario government extended our current emergency state orders until June 30th, closing out our first fiscal quarter. The Premier also made promises to treat these orders on a case-by-case basis based on need of regions and community. This is exactly what we're doing on the ground level in Renfrew Lanark. We are treating each other with grace and compassion on a case-by-case basis as we maneuver through this pandemic together. And from the Workforce Planning Desk, stay safe, Renfrew Lanark.